Being at the conference in person is very valuable to meet people in the hallways. I've had a lot of conversations with people so far and a lot of trading knowledge and getting excited about the same things.
Let's begin. Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandra Kemper, and I am the PM for the C++ extension in VS Code. And today I'll be talking about what's new in Visual Studio Code, including CMake improvements and GitHub Copilot agents, and how you can supercharge your workflow by adding all of these different features to your development cycle. And with that, let's begin. So if you walk into this talk and suddenly noticed, oh, this is VS Code, Visual Studio is a separate product, which is a separate talk, and they actually have their What's New talk later today at 2 p.m. And so if you're looking for Visual Studio, you're welcome to stay, but that talk is at 2 p.m. and we actually have a number of different talks happening today from Microsoft and later this week. And a couple of them are actually relevant to this talk in terms of Copilot features, for example. And we are also running a daily raffle. At this point, the puzzle's been raffled off, but we still have a number of different Lego sets. So feel free to find us at the booth if you would like to join the raffle. And so what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about faster performance in the C++ extension. The tooling updates we've made, for example, in the CMake Tools extension, how we're going to update a couple of build scripts with those. And then we're also going to talk about AI agents and build a project from scratch, and then general VS Code updates. And so before we kind of begin, let's get a lay of the land. And we have 3 main extensions for C++ development in VS Code. These have not changed. These might look familiar. And we have the C++ extension for code editing, navigation, debugging, all of your different development needs. And then the Makefile and CMake Tools extensions for building with CMake or Make, depending on your preference. And then, and these tools are always available. You can always use them. We're iterating on these extensions and regularly building new features. And then you also have GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat. These are bundled extensions. So if you install one, you install the other. And GitHub Copilot Chat is actually open source now, so you could even fork this and build your own if you would like to. And these kind of work in tandem. And you can always use the tools to edit your code, develop your features, but you can kind of supercharge this workflow using GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat to help you kind of take care of all the boilerplate manual work that you maybe don't want to do. But we'll see more of that throughout the demos that are to come. And so beginning with the C++ extension, let's kind of discuss what's new, because our big focus in the last year has been performance. We've had a lot of feedback around working with products at scale. And so we really tried to, we really worked on creating a faster project startup time as well as a faster time to colorization. And so project startup time is the time for the C++ extension to start up. And the time to colorization is the time it takes when you open a file for it to like syntactic and semantic colorization to exist. And so that's like the actually colorized variables and for IntelliSense to be available. And so on average, we've helped improve the project startup time by 3.5x and time to colorization is 4 times faster at this point. And both of these examples are in the PyTorch repo to kind of emulate a large open source code base. And this is where the interesting question, of course, is, okay, but how did you do this? What did you actually do? And this was a lot of like small incremental changes. Like, for example, we now cache the configuration for IntelliSense, so we don't have to parse for it every time you start the extension. We have better processing for compile commands.json support. We support multiple compile commands.json. We have better config handling. We've parallelized a lot of processes in the file discovery. And there's a lot more incremental changes, and I'm really happy to talk about these, but they are all covered in the blog post that's linked on the slide. And that's where you can kind of read more, and otherwise also feel free to come to me and talk about them. But that's where we're seeing these major changes with PyTorch, which is kind of the benchmark we always use to analyze whether the performance improvements we've made, we can actually see the difference. And then So other than all of these incremental changes, we also add more customization in the C++ extension, where you can now customize recursive include paths. And this is really important also for configuring IntelliSense, which is the colorization, hover, a lot of the editing features in the C++ extension are powered by IntelliSense. And so trying to get configured for IntelliSense really makes the whole process faster and those features more effective. And so these customized recursive includes, the include paths help set up IntelliSense. And so if you're not using one of the methods we just talked about in the last slide with config providers or compile commands.json file to configure, you can now actually customize a lot of different settings of how these include paths are processed. Since every single time you open a file, we recursively search through all the different subdirectories of that file to look for includes, which can be really resource intensive. And sometimes, depending on your file structure, doesn't really make sense. So you might want to customize this specifically to your project. And so now there's 3 new settings you can use to customize this based on your actual tree view of the different files you have available. And as you can see for PyTorch specifically, when we optimize the settings for our specific project, we were able to lower the time it takes for a file to colorize from 74 seconds to 37 seconds on a Linux machine. And so that's where there's a lot more information on how you can customize these and when to use which specific one with examples in the blog post. And I'm also happy to talk more about this afterwards. But it is very specific to your repo. And so some repos will benefit from this and others won't. And it just depends on your specific situation. Whereas the performance improvements on the last side apply across the board for all the different types of configuration. And so that's been our focus for the C++ extension. But now let's see what we've been doing in the CMake Tools extension. So we're going to update a couple of the build process in the VCMI repo. And VCMI is an open source project, which is actually the engine for Heroes of Might and Magic 3, which is like a battle game that you might be familiar with. And so let's switch over to this code. Right, that's not the one. Yes. Okay, let's go. So this is VCMI. Can everyone read the text on the screen? Okay, perfect. So this is the VCMI repo, Heroes of Might and Magic. I have already actually configured and built this repo. So technically I could begin coding right now, but as you can see, I actually have the VCMI repo open in this workspace as well as VCMI assets. And this is called a multi-root workspace, which we've already supported in VS Code. That's familiar, but one of our top asks in the last couple of years for CMake Tools is that, hey, I have multiple folders I have open. Many of them have CMake lists, and when I go to my CMake project outline, I actually see them all listed in my project outline, and I have this huge list of repos that aren't really relevant for the work I'm doing. Like, for example, here, I have my actual VCMI repo, and then just another repo that's different assets and icons and similar. And I don't really need those for the work that I'm doing, and I don't really want to include those in my build process. So now you can actually exclude those from the CMake outline specifically without removing them from your folder view. So if you open your settings, sorry, wrong one. Yeah, open your settings, you can use CMake exclude and just list the specific folders you'd like to exclude. So if let me copy over the path really quickly. So if we just Here, if we just copy over this path and name this the assets file, you can see now, okay, this will immediately apply. In my actually folder view, I can still see all the different folders I have available. If I go to GitHub, I can still see multiple different repos available and still make changes. However, for my CMake outline specifically, it's now been removed from the bottom of my outline, so I can only focus on the files that are relevant for my actual build process. And so now that I've kind of removed the assets, since that's not where I'm doing the work, I can now look at my actual VCMI project. And if I'm looking to update if I'm looking to update, for example, my presets, which if you might not be familiar with them, those are a set of different configurations that can be customized for the specific target and platform you are building for. So that's why this VCMI comes with a lot of different presets that are available for different platforms, different dependency managers, different generators you want to be using. And as you can see, we're using presets version 2. In the CMake Tools extension, we actually now support presets version 10, which comes with some new features. So if I now go, okay, that's fine. We're just going to skip that. So now if I go to my actual configuration, which I can get from the CMake sidebar, right, we're going to navigate to macOS, whoops, apologies. macOS Ninja VC package release. I can see the specific configuration I'm using, and with presets 10, I can now add comments. This is where you say, okay, Alex, but this is a JSON file. You can't add comments. We all know in JSON files, you can't add comments. This is a new field with CMake 10, where for presets, you can add a comment. And for this specific comment, you can now write a description for your, you can write a description now for the specific configuration. And so you can write, for example, that, oh, this is the most performant configuration if you're using a Mac. So as you can see here, yeah, this is the most performant configuration if you're using a Mac, and you can just add individual comments to all the different configurations. You can leave notes for your team members, or telling them when to use which configuration and which situations. Even though this is a JSON file, there's now a new variable supported here. And we're going to double check really fast that this is configuring correctly. And yeah, it is configuring correctly. And then also make sure Copilot is working correctly. Okay. So, so this is the most performant configuration if you're using a Mac. So we've added comments. And another thing that has also been added is support for Graphis. And Graphis is an open source graphical visualizer, which works with dot files. And so these dot files kind of are just like it generates graphs, for example, it's used a lot in networking. It can help write like dependency trees for your project. And it does this via dot files that kind of have like different edges and nodes, which are specified between different projects in a very specific layout. And so for these, with Graphis now being integrated into presets, you can actually add a Graphis field. And when you specify a path here, it will generate a Graphis dot file for you. So because normally you would have to like create it yourself. And so integrating this into presets, it creates a Graphis file for you specifically for your CMake targets and the different targets available in your project, as well as external libraries. And so that way you can review all these in one go. And so if we now configure our project, and so I've just kind of specified it should just create the graph.dot file. You can see that there's now a new step in the configure process where it says, okay, I've generated this dot file for you. And if we open this dot file, it's at, so if we look at this dot file, this is what a dot file normally looks like, where it just has a lot of different nodes and it describes all the different edges between them. And so this has all been generated by by the CMake for you. And now if you want to actually open this file, you just have to use, here, let's first copy the output. And you just use the dpng command to open this specific file and then create a diagram for you. Diagram.png. And so once we run this command, we now have a new diagram file right here. And that has generated a view for the entire VCMI project on what all the different targets look like. So if you want a reference, it shows executables, static libraries, shared libraries. There's a whole legend for it. And you can then kind of go through your project and see, here's all the different targets I have. Here's all the different executables. This is how they interact. And for example, also figure out, hey, something's not wrong here, something's not being linked correctly. And that's where Graphs is super helpful. And now you don't even need to write the dot file from scratch yourself. And so with that, so those are some of the new additions with CMake presets. And additionally, if you go to CMake lists, you can now use, wait, let's review this really fast. You can now use the GitHub Copilot chat, which you might be familiar with. We showed this last year as well. And with Copilot chat, there's now a few different modes. So there's ask mode, edit mode, and agent mode. We'll get to agent mode later. But right now in ask mode, this is kind of something really helpful to do if you have general questions about your code base. And you kind of want to brainstorm and discuss with chat. So this is where if I want to update my CMake lists, for example, I can say, I want to update my build process, but with my build process, I want to, for example, add more target-based development to my CMake lists file. Whoop. That's not supposed to be the case. Give me 1 second, please. We're going to switch networks very quickly. The conference Wi-Fi is sometimes not the most reliable. So, yeah, there we go. Okay. Perfect. Okay, let's retry that one more time. And we have a connection. Good start. So, okay, and this is where it doesn't matter as much if you have a little bit of spelling errors. Copilot will still understand the gist of what you're trying to do. And as you can see here, I did not have to explicitly add context, which is new from last year, where you had to like specify the specific workspace. You don't have to, it will just pull in the context for you of what files do you currently have open, what files are you currently working on, what part of your text do you have highlighted. And here, and as you can see, it's just kind of listing a couple of different recommendations. And okay, it's saying, yes, please use target properties over global settings, which is a general good advice with some specific examples. And move logic over to subdirectories and move targets over, yeah. So this is where we could read this in detail, but for the sake of the demo, we're going to just go with the first step, which is adding target compile definitions. And now if I actually start beginning to change my CMake lists, if I'm writing code here, I can say, okay, I want to add a target compile definitions. And, oh, wait, actually, we're going to do this in a different line. And as you can see, okay, the gray text right there, whoops, that just went away and got replaced by something else. Come here. Come back to me here. And here. The gray text right there, that is completions. This is where there's a lot of different Copilot features. The gray text filled in line as you're editing is via completions. And completions are now actually more context-aware than ever and are using GPT 4.1. And we're constantly evaluating new models to use for code completions for them to be the most helpful in your context. And 4.1 has actually been trained on more C++ code than previous models, so the suggestions it provides are more relevant to actual C++ code bases than before. And these, and this is where also, if you don't want to use 4.1, you can actually now choose which model you want to use. For the chat as well, which is there's 4.1, 4.0, Claude, Gemini, and you can kind of choose whichever one you like the most depending on your personal preferences and the task that you're doing. So when I'm writing like, for example, working on strings or have larger pieces of text, I like to use Claude. If I'm doing like inline changes or changing things in chat, I like to use GPT-4.1, but this is where it comes down to personal preference and you're not tied into a specific model. And so with that, let's add the target compile definitions. And so I'm going to add launcher here. And as you can see, it completes this for me. So we're going to accept this change and then delete this line. And now, if we continue on, you can see there, this is another new feature, which is next edit suggestions. And next edit suggestions are slightly different than completions because they're not just in line, hey, I think this is what you're typing, this is what you want to do next. They actually preemptively say, okay, I just saw you changed add definitions to target compile definitions. You probably want to do that again. And so it kind of recognizes the pattern of the work you're doing and then makes a multi-line suggestion that's not just one inline completion. And so with that, you can just easily tab accept, and it's able to actually change these depending on the situation. And so it just kind of keeps saying, okay, you keep making the same changes, you probably want to do this again, and you can just tab your way through all of the code that you have available. And so, yeah, so that's why it just says, okay, you probably want to replace target compile definitions for your entire file if you've already started on this. And so, and then you might have noticed in between that for the CMake language services that you can see based on hover, which describe your variables for you, these CMake language services now are actually powered not by a third-party app, but by the CMake Tools extension itself. This was one of the biggest asks from our users in our GitHub to switch this over to be actually built into the CMake Tools extension. And so that's where you just have information on all the variables you're working on. It can have a quicker understanding of what's happening, and it's actually relevant to your specific build and built into VS Code, and by extension also works with the C++ extension. So this is where I've now made a couple of changes, and one broad change that's been added to VS Code is that if you now click on the changed lines, you can decide that, hey, I've made this change, I want to actually stage this individual change right here as I'm going along versus just doing it, saving an entire file. You can now incrementally stage these changes from the editor directly using this plus arrow. And that way you don't have to change an entire line, save it, and then try to nitpick in the GitHub changes view what changes you want to accept or add or try to do this line by line. You can just do it as you go. And you also have a new diff view so that if you go under diff decorations, you can show, oh, I only want to show local changes that are in the working tree, or I only want to show ones in the index. So if I dislabel this, I can see this is the only edit I've changed versus here are different changes that I'm not actually going to stage. And so that way you can just customize your view depending on where you are in the file. And yeah, and so this is kind of like the gist of it. We've updated the build scripts for the VCMI repo, and with that, let's kind of recap. Here we go. Okay. So what have we done? Okay, we do not need the backup recording, luckily. Okay, for a second I thought that was my microphone. So what have we just seen? You can update your CMake build scripts using the new CMake language services, which are now powered by the CMake Tools extension. We have support for CMake presets version 10, which has support for comments in the JSON files via the comment variable, and you can now build Graphis dot file generation into your presets. And then We also have configurability now if you have multi-root folders in your workspace, and you can now exclude specific folders from the CMake process specifically, but they will still be available in your folders view. Something we did not cover today was Copilot Hover, which is on-the-fly documentation. So when you parse over variables in your C++ code, you can click on Generate Summary, and Copilot can describe that variable for you and describe how that variable works and in the context of your code base. And then additionally for C++ completions, these are continuously evolving and are now becoming more and more aware of C++ code bases, how these code bases work, and now have next edit suggestions, which can determine what your next changes are, and have more contextual improvements for C++ coding structures. And then also you can stage commits directly in the editor. So, now that we've kind of seen what tooling can do and we've updated the build process, what happens if you actually want to build something from scratch? Because sure, you can always build it manually. Yes, we have Copilot, but from what we can saw, it kind of does single line updates. Or if you use ask mode in Copilot, okay, you get all these instructions, you get this long list of text to read of all the different improvements you can make. But do you actually want to make all of these changes? Do you want to read through all this and then try to decipher what commands that actually becomes? This is where you can see, actually on the right here, if you are looking for how to build a snake game from scratch, it can give you a very long list of directions, but then all you're doing is just kind of copying commands over, trying to understand what is going on. And this is where agents come in. And this is newly integrated into VS Code. And with agents, all of this is kind of taken to the next level because the main difference with agents is that they're intelligent systems who can work at a higher level. So they still accept natural language instructions. It's still built into the Copilot chat interface in VS Code. And then there's some additional that I will also show you later. And they can work on more complex workflows. So they make their own to-do lists. They can invoke tools, which means that they can, for example, run command line tools. They can run commands in the command line. They can invoke the compiler or debugger and work more asynchronously from what you're doing and can edit multiple files at once. So this is where you're just kind of taking a step back, and rather than saying, oh, I want to change one specific variable in this line, you're working across an entire project. And so let's actually see this in action. And what we're going to do is, you remember .files, right, from Graphis that we just covered a second ago? We're actually going to build this from scratch. And specifically, wait, this is VCMI. We're first going to find the code for this. And so what we're going to do here, this is like an empty project. I've just added a few files. What we're going to do is we're going to generate a visualizer using Graphis. And since the one that's integrated into presets specifically is for executables and targets, it's not for your entire code base. Let's just build one of these from scratch that actually works with all of the different includes in your code base and makes a mapping of all the different header and source files and how they're interconnected. Since that's something also really helpful to figure out, oh, maybe one file is not referencing the other. And so what you can see here is I have a prompt file and an instructions file. And I did write these ahead of time to spare us some time so you didn't have to watch me type all of this out in one go. And first, let's begin with the Copilot instructions file. And this is new because this kind of introduces your coding preferences. So this is appended to every single interaction you have with Copilot chat that says, hey, this is how I like to write my code. And so I've just kind of written a standard set of Copilot instructions that is like, okay, I like to write modern C++. I have a couple of personal preferences in terms of casing. I like to use C++20. I don't want you to write code in these specific ways. Here's some safety features I would like to see. And so these Copilot instructions might sound familiar because these used to be called custom instructions in case you were at our talk last year. And so these will just be appended every single time. And this is really helpful so you don't have to say, okay, Copilot, you've generated some code for me, but obviously this doesn't fit the rest of my code base. This is not how we name our functions. This is not how we do things. And you don't have to nitpick every single line of code that Copilot has written for you. It just knows in general, this is how you like to write your code. And then separately, I've also created a prompt file. And this prompt file is actually just says, what do I want to do here? And just injects the prompt via file into the agent. And so I just want to create a C++ 20 project with multiple files. And I wanted to analyze the C++ code base and parse the include relationships, and then generate a dot file for me that maps out all these relationships. And this is where I have some more details of like, here's the framework to use. It needs to be cross-platform. Make a presets file for me, since that's good practice as CMake. And keep iterating until it actually builds. And so if we now want to run this prompt file, there's a way to actually import prompt files if you would like. But since I already have this in my project, I don't need to import it since from a different area. So let's get this started, and I will tell you some more. So if we now call the generate diagram, which is the same name as the prompt file, I want to say, please generate this diagram in C++. And so while this is running, we can see you can actually import the different instruction files. So you don't actually have to rewrite your instruction file with every single repo. You can just have one instruction file, and at the beginning of when you create your workspace, add this and import this from somewhere else. You can also import different prompt files, and that's where prompt files are also really helpful if you have a repetitive task you want Copilot to do, like, oh, I just wrote this feature, please add unit tests, or that cover these specific scenarios, or I need an onboarding document for someone on my team. Prompt files actually also support variables, so in the Copilot chat, you can then say, oh, this is for a junior developer or a senior developer, or different types of people joining your team who might need different documents to get started. And so that's where prompt files are really helpful. Okay, so let's check in very quickly. So one of the new things is that there's now a to-do list where agents are this agent mode, as you can see on the right here, is actually working at a higher level. It first makes a to-do list. It says, this is all the different work I'm going to be doing. I'm going to design a project structure, implement the code, do some testing, generally good practices. And I did not specify that it needed to test this. I just said I want you to eventually build this project. And so it's decided, oh, okay, I'm going to test this end-to-end with our current repo. I'm fine with that. That sounds great. That should work. And so it's just created a couple of different files. Since I also specified, please create multiple files so we see something in the dependency view. And so if we look at our code, it's written, it's just calling on different files to scan all the different directories for dependencies, and it actually generates the graph and just spreads this out across multiple different files. It's using both source and header files. I'm happy with that. And so if we look at the CMake lists, it also specified the C++ standard 20, which I had set in my instructions file and in my prompt, and then is using, has also connected to Graphis. So that's a great start. We're on a good track. And this is where with agents, you're able to invoke tools. And as you can see, it's now stopped, and it wants to run a command line command to actually configure and build this project. This is where with the agent mode, which is what you see on the right in chat, it is not going to run these commands without your approval. So this is where running a command is a tool, and you can see on the bottom right here, there's now an indicator for this, where you have a couple of built-in different tools in VS Code, and then some that are specific to the to specific extensions. So for example, the GitHub pull request extension has some tools that are built in, and you can customize whether you use any of these tools. So if you never ever want to have agent mode even be aware of the fact that it could run command line tools, you can just disable this here really easily with a check mark. But what we want it to do is now, please configure and build this project. So I can just accept this. And it's now run into an issue that there's no build preset called macOS debug. Okay, so this is where I've also asked it to, hey, if you run into an issue, don't just tell me there's an issue, try and fix the issue so I don't need to keep going back and forth interacting with Copilot chat trying to figure out how this works. And so that's where it's not trying to fix this itself by saying, okay, let me list all the presets that are available. And it's seeing that, okay, macOS is an available configure preset, and it's going to try to run again. Okay, and so it's running into the same problem. And this is where you need to make sure that you review what Copilot is doing, and which is why running command line tools is interactive. Because as you can see, what it's now trying to do is just to configure using the preset by itself. And if it continues doing this and this is not successful, this is where I would kind of step in and say this is not working. But as you can see, it now said, okay, configuring and building in the same step is not working. I'm just going to configure. Configuring was successful. Build files have been written to the correct the correct folder. And now it's going to separately try to build. And so in that way, it will actually iterate through the problems and try to solve them for you versus then immediately coming back to you and saying, this doesn't build. You try to solve the build error, and then it comes back to you and says, this doesn't build. And so it just kind of takes care of all the steps for you. And now if we select to actually build this dependency visualizer, and we cross our fingers, yes, it actually generated the dot file correctly. And it also built this project for us. And this is, as you can see, it actually parsed all of the different files in this project for their includes, which is why there's some stuff from the actual build in here. And if you wanted to, you could specify, hey, please take this out. But it just built this entire project in 10 minutes from scratch, or in under 10 minutes, I believe, depending on the time. So with that, so now that we've kind of used, so now that that was successful, we're going to keep the code that it's written. This is where we could review more if we would like to. And we are now actually going to use another agent. This is where all the wording might start sounding very similar. There's agent mode, which we've been using. And there's agent mode, which we've been using in chat. And there also is the GitHub Copilot agent, which is actually able to make code changes for you. And then also create a PR for you, including relevant commit messages. And this is more asynchronous, where it works on its own. And unlike the agent, you're not individually accepting every command it's running. It's just doing all of this for you. So if we say Copilot agent, please change, for example, we already saw the graph, please change the whole thing to be blue. Instead of black. And so invoking specifically the Copilot coding agent, the coding agent is built to actually write code and create PRs. And this agent is trained for this purpose. It's not just a general model like using GPT 4.1. And so that's why it's especially good at this process. So it's going to build these changes. And we can see that in the generator file, it's changed the color for us. We are going to skip building it because I believe that this is correct. If you want to, we can run this later. But what's interesting, though, is it will not start these coding agents without your approval. So as you can see, it's now saying, I'm invoking the coding agent. This is what the coding agent will do. It's going to continue working on this, turning those blue, testing to make sure it all works, and then create a separate branch and create a PR based on your upstream for you. So if I allow this, it launches the agent, and the agent just works asynchronously. So we can see, okay, it's created a new branch. That's a good start. And now it will continue iterating. And okay, all the code is updated, and now it's create a PR for me. And if I want to see more, I can see, okay, this is a pull request. It's updated the name of the actual PR for me. It's created a description. It has assigned itself to do the task of now finishing the changes of making all the different nodes blue. And it will now continue to iterate and write code for this. And if we take a look in the actual PR on GitHub, we can see that it's now assigned itself. However, it says it assigned Copilot and it assigned me to this PR because it's not going to just randomly push PRs to your branches. It's going to create this PR, make a lot of changes, and then ask me to review the changes. And this is going to take a minute. So in the meantime, we're going to jump back to the slides. So let's go back. And if we go, okay. So now that we're back in the slides, what we just saw is there are Copilot agents, which specifically the Copilot coding agent, and there's the agent mode in VS Code. And I want to point out that these are distinct because the agent mode in VS Code is interactive. As we saw, it runs command line commands for you, but only with your approval. And it's kind of an interactive experience. You can jump in and say, hey, this didn't work correctly. This needs to be changed, or I want you to take a different approach if you want to. And you kind of have immediate feedback. You can decide what tools it has access to, versus there's the Copilot coding agent, which is the first of like a specific agent that works asynchronously. It's integrated into GitHub, and you are not approving individual commands. It kind of takes a step back and is working on its own, but it will still include you in major decision process. It's not going to completely push PRs to main without your approval on a Friday afternoon. So that's why it's going to be working in the background. And so with these agents, we saw, okay, it managed to create this code, is building the kind of Graphis similar viewer of like the source and header files you have available in your project completely new? No. I'm honestly pretty sure that everyone in this room could have written the code that Copilot wrote today. Actually, who here thinks they could have written that code? So few people? You have no faith in yourself. I am extremely confident. Maybe you couldn't have written it in the time that it takes, but I'm extremely confident everyone at CppCon can definitely write that code. It was split across a couple of files, but the question really is, okay, you could probably figure this out yourself eventually. You could build this dependency viewer. However, do you want to take the time? Do you want to spend a couple hours, half a day, multiple days, trying to figure out, okay, how do I make this? How do I configure this? Writing all the commits yourself, creating the PRs. Could you spend the time? Yes. Do you really want to? Probably not.
Maybe once.
Maybe once? Yeah, maybe once. But this is where we just made this in under 5-10 minutes. Use Copilot agents to your advantage. Use them to do all the work that would really help you write code in ways that matters to you, to work on features that matter to you, and don't spend your time on boilerplate things or manual tasks or all the things that really irritate you and you really don't want to deal with. Use it to write the code that actually interests you. And that's where all the things that it doesn't interest you, it can do pretty quickly. You just review the code, and then it's already over with, and you don't have to spend an entire day writing unit tests. And so with that, let's recap. We saw you can now have custom instructions where you can specify, this is my coding preferences. You can have prompt files, and these prompt files are specific tasks that I can do. And these prompt files, you can reuse them very easily. You can now choose the different models available, which are not specific to GPT 4.1 or Copilot ChatGPT models. It can be Claude, depending on your personal preferences. And something we did not get to is you can actually also now, from the same dropdown that I showed you, if you click on the Manage Models item here at the bottom of the model picker, you can actually also bring your own key. And so this is pretty much just you bring an API key, you specify that API key, and that model will be used to power chat. And so, for example, if at your company you say, oh, I don't want to use GPT, or we have specific models we've trained and that know our system super well, or we have an extremely intricate build system, which I have heard since yesterday, you can specify this for you, train your model, and then just connect the API key, and Copilot chat will be aware of all of this information. And Additionally, you can now connect tools. And so these go beyond basic code generation, which lets you interact with your code in new ways, like run commands, invoke the debugger. And these can be manually done by agents if you're using like agent mode, for example, or asynchronously used by the Copilot coding agent. And then there are also something separate, which is the mono context protocol, which is actually if you want to go beyond what's the built-in tools that I was kind of showing you the list of, and you want to connect external-based extensions. And this is where you can build your own tools, connect them externally, have them specific to what your team likes to work on. And since this can be and that can be connected to any server-based extension that anyone has built. And if you are looking at me and you work in enterprise and this is a concern, there are ways to limit which tools your developers have access to. This is not going to be download a random tool you've seen online that introduces problems. So there are enterprise-wide permission policies if you are concerned about that. But otherwise, it can also just give you access to a very big marketplace of tools available. And before we kind of continue on, let's check in really quickly with the PR that we had. And so now we see, okay, so it has actually now updated the description because it says, okay, here's the changes I've made. Here are my findings. These are the details. Here are my next steps. And it's pushed a change. And so this is where the work by the Copilot coding agent, which writes code and can create PRs, ends, because this is what it specifically is trained to do. And this is where we can invoke the next agent, which is actually a code review agent. So I can say up here, okay, I want to request a review from Copilot. And so now that we've made the changes, Copilot is going to go through these and try and make suggestions of this is what you could change. And this is kind of like a first pass. Maybe it shouldn't be your only pass, but it can maybe help catch the common errors, the security issues, the big things before you start bugging your coworker to say, hey, have you reviewed my PR? Have you reviewed my PR? Have you reviewed my PR? And that kind of saves everyone some time and effort. And yeah, and that's where we will see the changes. And since this is taking a minute, and we need to continue on for the sake of time, I will show you a completed PR where this is what the result for which is pretty much a similar change as you can see, which was just excluding the build directories that we saw that were disconnected from the other header and source files, and what the results for the Copilot code review would look like is that it tells you, okay, here's the pull request and what it does as a whole, and makes a description of this is the change I would recommend, and actually has the fixed code available right there. So it's not just giving you feedback and now you have to go figure it out yourself. It's actually interactive and you can just commit that suggestion. And so this is where it's saying, oh, this is not actually working as you expected. You need to make these changes, or this actually performs two lookups, this is inefficient, and that's where these agents are not the same thing. One of them is writing the code and the other is reviewing the code and saying, hey, you're doing a terrible job. And so that's why it's important to look at the code that AI is writing, and also if an agent gives you a suggestion, review the suggestion. Don't just say, hey, I'm just gonna accept all because this is the easiest thing and I don't feel like reviewing all this. Look at what it's writing and make sure this works for you. And so with that, let's go back to the presentation. We can also take a look at the end and see for our specific PR what the code review feedback was. But so that's where agents come in with tools, MCP, and if you want to learn more about extensibility for agents, there's actually 2 talks at this conference related to this. There's one by my coworker Ian for LLMs in the trenches, and that's like systems engineering and how he used AI in his process of building various different system projects. And so that talk is actually tomorrow at 2 p.m. And then there's a talk specifically about MCP and how the model context protocol works, with an example of building a model context protocol from scratch. And that is also on Wednesday at 3:50. So if you want to learn more about this, there's like talks specific to this. We just kind of were at a high level today. And so this is where, in the space of Copilot and how it's being integrated into our code editors and IDE, it's changing where it's not just you and chatting with Copilot. There's now a lot of tooling being added where it's you potentially just chatting with Copilot, which is actually using an agent to connect to various different tools, to connect to various different MCP servers, and provide you way more functionality to meet you where you are. And now, for GitHub Copilot, there's actually 2 big announcements from the last year. And that is that the Copilot chat extension is actually open source. So you can fork it yourself, you can build it yourself, you can customize it. And it's actually been really exciting to watch everyone fork this and kind of make it their own. The user here, wait, it's the user here that has, it's just named Copilot Chat, wait, the one down here. But that person, you know how every time with the agent it says, oh, I need to run this command, and it asks you every time? They actually added this very loud pinging noise that every time it asks you to do that, your computer pings very loudly, which is a personal preference. But, if they would like to, they now forked it. This is available. They can use this. And otherwise, you can also, like, one person added, they enhanced their prompts, and they used like an enhanced prompt, which adds more context. And another person, the one on the right, actually made some changes. It's called WhatsApp, but what it does, it tracks for how many requests you've made to Copilot Chat. And the reason they're tracking their requests is because Copilot the free tier has now been released. And for the free tier, you do have a rate limit, but it's an unlimited rate limit with the Pro and Enterprise subscriptions. And so this is where I really encourage you to try it out at github.com/features/Copilot. And then additionally, why you should also, if you've tried it before, maybe try it out again is because things are changing so quickly. I don't know if you've been here for the last, like I've given this talk for the last 2 years, and I've really just seen how much changes happen based on the features I show you every year. Like Copilot edits were integrated into VS Code in November 2024. That is not very long ago. And now we have Copilot Chat's open sourced. Oh, we have ChatGPT 5 is released. We now have AI agents which are creating PRs and reviewing code for you. We actually are now working on C++ specialized agents where right now, okay, it creates a PR for you, but in the future, it knows specifically how C++ code bases are laid out and can help you specifically, for example, with a C++ build system or more complex build system, have help there. But this is where everything is moving with AI so incredibly quickly. And this is where this is the chance to kind of stick with it, try it out. If you've tried it out a couple months ago, everything has changed. There's a lot of new features, and find a way to make Copilot work for you. Find a way to get it to take care of all the boilerplate manual tasks you don't want to do, and use that to your advantage. Yeah. And so with that, does anyone have any questions? Also, if you have a question, please walk up to the microphone. We have about 5 minutes. Otherwise, feel free to come by and just talk to me, or come to me at the booth. We also have a couple of people from the C++ Copilot team at the conference who are not here right now, so you can also talk to them at the booth. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, hi, thanks for the presentation. Yeah. I was wondering, so when, if I would open VS Code with Copilot and use its completion, can I guarantee that any information that it provides, it only uses from an open source file, so I don't accidentally get software from, let's say, another company? It's a two-part question. The second question, how do I make sure that it never learns my code, the code that I open, it never adds to any database? Yeah, this is a big concern. And the big thing is that
Copilot is trained on public open source, it's trained on public GitHub repos and some text-based solutions, but it's not trained on private repos. It is not actually collecting the individual code lines it's giving you. And then additionally, we can never make any guarantees that it will never give you a recommendation that's private code. That's just not something we can do. However, there are additional filters you can put in, which make sure that, hey, if any of this code looks like it could be concerning or it could be copied from somewhere on the internet, you can add additional filters. I believe it's in the pro tier and the enterprise tier, where you can actually create enterprise-wide policies that say you cannot use anything that even looks remotely like this is copied from somewhere else. So that's where they've built specific filters for this, yeah.
And it will never learn on my code.
It will not learn on your code, yeah. It uses, because it just uses public repos. And yeah, this is where you can also see this in the official GitHub Copilot documentation if you look up their FAQ, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So given a pretty good instruction file and and the prompt, how much variance is in there between what's generated, for example, one day to next week? How much variance would there be?
So there's always going to be some variance.
Yeah.
I cannot say that's, it will always be exactly the same, because this is just the nature of working with something that's a little bit of a black box. But this is where, for example, putting the demo together for the Graphis, I kind of made the prompt file, and it generally generated the same thing, and it was always able to generate the actual graph file, even though the exact file layout, for example, was different. I just told it, hey, you need to have multiple files, and you can decide how you want to lay those out, but I need the graph in the end to be the same, and that's usually what worked. And for me personally, usually what I would run into was configuration errors or build errors, like what we saw today. And so generally, it usually led to the same results no matter what. But of course, it's always going to vary a little bit. And what I usually do is I actually iterate on my prompt files, where you can also ask Copilot, hey, this is my prompt file. Is there any way I can improve my prompt file? Because sometimes it has really good insights that you maybe didn't think of. And then also, I just usually append my prompt files that, hey, I found out that it's not generating a presets file. I actually wanted that. I make a change to my prompt file and try again. So yeah, that's where I think it's just an iterative process over time.
Thanks, Alexandra. For the review agent, is that
Yes.
also customizable with a .pilot file or something of that nature?
I don't think so yet.
Okay, thank you.
It's pretty new. I think they're still working on building it out and making it available. But this is where, if we look at, let's actually see if the one we created made the changes. Yeah. So right now, it's just something you can additionally add as a reviewer, and it's not, and it gives you your feedback. I think it can be set at an enterprise level, but do not quote me on that. I would look up online on the official documentation what it says for that.
Thank you.
As far as I was aware, it's not configurable yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Sweet.
Hi, Alexander. Thank you very much for the nice presentation. Is it possible to bring this environment into a closed gap area, disconnected from the internet? Is there, what would be, in a nutshell, what would be the 3 steps that would have to be conquered?
Well, the problem is that Copilot, because it's sending all these requests to the LLM, it does need an internet connection. Especially if you're working on something that's air-gapped, that's extremely tricky, and you can probably figure something out if you have your own models you're bringing and you're already working in an air-gapped environment, but that is extremely difficult. And if you could just come talk to me after the talk, because you can find solutions for this, but this is not kind of the standard use case we are building for. So I think you would need to, you would need to really come talk to us, and we can try and find a solution that works for you guys.
Am I the only one in this?
No, you're not the only
alone?
one. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who work in government who come to us and it's okay, so how can I use this thing that's connected to the internet? And we're oh, that's going to be a little bit tricky. But you are not alone. We do hear this, and that's why we also are building so many features for enterprise of of limiting what tools you have access to, because we hear from people who are working in enterprise saying, okay, but I don't want my employees to be able to just download anything from the internet.
So it sounds like there'll be this enterprise cocoon that'll live.
Yes, with like also a lot of
Contained.
enterprise level settings.
Sure.
I don't know if those will be, fit all your needs with air-gapped specifically, since air-gap is pretty restrictive. So that's why I would say come talk to us and we will figure something out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Was it? Okay. Amazing. One more. Okay.
Thank you for the talk. Very informative. In one of the agentic examples, he showed that Copilot, you have to give it the custom instructions on how to build, and then it runs those commands in the terminal. Do you see at any point in integrating Copilot as a tool with the CMake Tools extension, so it can just use the default build button and the settings JSON that there are, or?
You are onto something.
Okay, I see.
That's where, hold on tight, keep an eye out for any announcements that come.
Okay.
And this is where we are building C++ specific agents. And there are a couple of familiar ways that you could integrate an agent into the C++ process, especially because a lot of people struggle with setting up build processes and configuring them. So that's why keep an eye out for any announcements. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay. That is it. If not anyone, you're welcome to come find me after the talk or at the booth. Thank you so much.